Hey guys, welcome back to the Derick podcast. We've got a guest today that is running for our local city council. This is Michelle Tanner. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you came in. This should be fun to kind of go around kind of our local home base issues and also talk about, I'm sure we'll get into some national issues as well, and what one person and what one town can do to fix that.
Right. It only takes one.
That's what they always tell me. Is that true though?
I believe it takes one person on God's side. Because David and Goliath, right?
Sure.
We're up against Goliath, but as long as we've got God on our side, I truly do believe one person can make a huge impact.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, let's kind of dive into your background a little bit. So you know my wife, you work at the hospital?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
So your wife and I were both nurse practitioners.
Yep.
So yeah, she's amazing. Love your wife. Super cool.
I like
You're
her.
a lucky guy.
I know.
Yeah. So I do still work in the ER.
Okay.
I'm very part-time now. Really the last year I've been very part-time, but emergency medicine, that's been my life really for the last decade. I've worked in super busy ERs down in Las Vegas, almost every ER I've worked in Las Vegas, to rural ERs. I worked in Kanab. I loved that rural critical access hospital out there. Was actually probably one of my favorite jobs. And then I've been here in St. George at our local ER for the last 5-6 years. So, but yeah, the last year I've cut back to pretty part-time, just a few shifts a month there.
Okay. And then you said you have your own business.
I
So
do,
what are you doing?
yeah.
What's that? What are you doing with that?
Yeah, so it's called Bella 2 Medical, which means beautiful you in Italian.
I like it.
I started it about 3 years ago now, and we started pretty small. It was just very part-time. I kind of just saw the need for something to use my skills to help people feel good about themselves, right? Like in medicine, a lot of times we're focused on the sick, right? And I mean, especially in the hospital setting. And so it was cool to have this side business where I'm basically just helping people look good and feel good. Started with aesthetics, with doing injections like Botox and fillers and skincare, but it's evolved more. I added the Bella 2 Medical, because I knew I also wanted to provide services to help keep people out of the hospital.
Okay.
So we do IV infusions. That's something we've been pretty busy with lately, with just boosting people's immune systems with those high-dose IV vitamins and minerals.
That's getting super popular right now.
It is, yeah. There's a pretty high demand for it. And it's pretty cool to see how a lot of times just the immediate relief people get with it, and even just prevention too, to keep your immune system up and get a lot of athletes just staying hydrated, that type of thing.
Run me through how that works real quick, because I've always been interested in that, and I know there's a lot of high level people that I follow in social media and different things that they do this like on a regular basis. Yeah,
it's pretty common to do it kind of as a maintenance thing. So it really varies. We kind of pride ourselves on being very customized. So we do have kind of set packages of like, this is the performance IV, or this one's geared toward weight loss. This one's geared toward boosting the immune system. But we really try to take a personal approach and figure out, okay, what's going on with you personally? What are you trying to accomplish with this IV? And we can customize and put in, higher doses of vitamin C, maybe if you've got an illness going on, or B12 if, it's an energy issue. All the way to, I have people all the time who call me up and are like, I have a terrible migraine. I'd normally go to the ER for this. Can you help me out? And those are probably my favorite, because it's saving them an ER visit.
Sure.
And I'm going to give them the exact same thing that I would order in the emergency department, but save them having to go there. And they get that, really quick relief, by the hour they're done getting the infusion. Typically migraine's gone, feeling great. They can get on with their lives. So it's really a neat service to offer.
So, I mean, you can really skip a lot of, I would imagine in the ER, there's a lot of things that come in that could be solved by not going to the ER for one, but
right.
but like this would be another check mark, and then you have the background of being there and seeing these things.
Right. So I know that, okay. And actually, my husband's an RN. He's the one who's over all of our IV infusion. So he's very trained, and he used to work in emergency medicine. He's been an ICU nurse before. And so both of us are very aware of if there's a situation of, okay, you need more than what we can offer. You've got to go to the hospital, which rarely that has happened. But it's important to have someone trained who knows those things to watch for, because especially in the climate right now, nobody wants to go to the hospital. There's a big fear of going to the hospital. And so sometimes you do get people who truly need to go to the hospital, but they're trying to do everything they can to stay out of there. So it is important to have that training as well.
That's cool. Sorry, I cut you off, but I was just curious about that.
No.
So we were talking about your business, what you guys offer.
Yeah.
How long you been doing it? 3 years? Is that what you said?
3 years. So really the last, I started at pretty part-time. I was still working a lot in the ER when I first started it. And then this last probably year and a half or so is when we've really amped things up. We purchased what's called an Opus plasma laser, which is the latest technology in skin resurfacing. And it's pretty exciting because we were the second facility in the country to really start utilizing it. So it's great for stretch marks, fine lines, wrinkles, just overall rejuvenation. So we keep fairly busy doing that. And it's kind of unique that we are the only facility in the region that offers that technology.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you guys are more than just Botox.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we do a lot more.
When I would think about that, that's what would go through my mind.
Right.
As someone that's uneducated in the department.
Right.
But that's cool. So do you and your husband own it together? Are you his boss? How does that work?
Yeah, he'll definitely say I'm his boss. So yeah, we technically own it together. Okay. He actually, he does a lot of the hard work. Not only is he basically stay-at-home dad, which I believe is the hard work. We've got 2 kids, so he's very much, I'd be a mom, that's number one for me, obviously, but he holds down the fort really at home he does all the cooking. I am so lucky. He's an amazing chef. He does a lot of the cleaning, a lot of the day-to-day stuff with the kids. I know, right?
Mallory, cut that part out. I don't need Amanda hearing that.
Right. But then he does also help run the business. He does all of our, inventory and a lot of our IVs as well. So he's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I love my wife to death. Like the cliche is take a bullet for her, right? Like I would do anything for her. We could not work together. And we both know it.
Right. And it's interesting. And I do hear people say that a lot. But yeah, we complement each other pretty good in that area because we do have a lot of similarities. We're both very conscious about finances. It's not like one of us are like a big spender and the other one's trying to hoard the money. So we get along really well with finances, which I think spills over into business if you think alike that way. But then we complement each other a lot in the fact that I do tend to be more spontaneous and he tends to be the more cautious of wait, maybe let's take a step back. Let's think about this first before you just jump into this.
Yeah, so kind of grounds you a little bit.
Exactly. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amanda and I are kind of the same way. She's I'll work 7 days a week and just stay home on my day off if I get one. And, and she's the rock climbing, skydiving.
So awesome. Yeah.
Mountain bike riding, and I'm like, I'll just hang out at the house and see when you get back.
Yeah, I love seeing all her posts when just when your baby was just tiny out climbing. I'm like, yes, those are my people right there.
I know, she's
so great.
Will's gonna have a great life.
So great. I love it.
Well, we kind of thought we'd have you on because you're running for city council, and that's going right now.
It is, yeah.
So what stage are we in? Is there I don't know how it works. Is there a primary?
There is.
Is that what it's called?
Yep. So there was the primary election, which took place in August.
Okay.
And there were originally 12 of us running for 2 open seats.
Okay.
So the primary took us down to the top 4. And thankfully, I feel really blessed. I was the top out of the primary election.
That you were the top.
So I got the highest number of votes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool, pretty exciting. But now we're not there yet because now we have the general election coming up, which is November 2nd.
Okay.
And ballots actually got mailed out yesterday. So people could be starting to vote here just within the next few days when they get their ballots.
Yeah. And today is the 13th. So this should air the 14th.
Okay.
And so,
so they'll be getting their ballots soon. So Michelle Tanner, mark that bubble. There's 2 Michelles too. So Michelle with 2 L's, Michelle Tanner.
What's the other Michelle's name?
So the other Michelle's running for mayor.
Oh,
but I do think sometimes people get us mixed up. Randall, right? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So why city council? I mean, you got enough on your plate, it sounds like.
I know, right? Yeah, it's really been an interesting year. I definitely never aspired to be in any type of a position such as this. I have always been very liberty-minded. That's always been something that's just, even from a young kid, I remember that being very important to me. And even as a teenager, I was reading those type of books that, on the Constitution and history. And I flew out when I was 19 years old by myself to a big Restoring Honor Liberty rally in Washington, D.C. Cool. Nobody wanted to come with me. And I felt just that spirit of liberty, that draw that, no, I need to be there. This is important. This is our country. So that's always been obviously big priority for me. But, life happens. We get busy and you go to college and family and life. And so I wasn't really keeping up on everything as much as I should be. And so this last 18 months was like a huge eye-opener to me of what can happen. I think we sometimes think that we are, at least living here in St. George, right? We kind of think we live in this bubble of, most people are fairly like-minded and believe in the Constitution, I like to think. Yeah. And to see how quickly people just throw that away.
Right.
And it was like, I remember when like Washington, Oregon started with the mask mandate. And I was thinking like, that's not going to happen in Utah. Like no way would people let that happen here. The next thing I know, we have a mask mandate. And that was really my actual tipping point, because when COVID, what was that? February, March, 2020, right?
Yep.
I was on the side of being very cautious. I was pregnant at the time and working in the ER. And so I'm thinking, gosh, we don't know what this thing is.
Yeah, it was terrifying at
first.
Right,
like we had no idea. And I still wasn't in the camp of like, oh yeah, government needs to shut everything down. But just on a personal level, I was doing a ton of research because I truly, having kids, like I wanted to make sure I was doing what I needed to do to protect my family. I was researching masks. Are they really effective? And when the school board sent out that email saying that masks were going to be mandated on elementary children, and I have an elementary child, that was my tipping point of, okay, this is not about a virus anymore.
Right.
This is about something more, because I've read the research. There is not the scientific studies to back up mandating masks on healthy elementary children. You've got to be freaking kidding me.
I couldn't agree more.
I mean, it's outrageous.
We talked about this with Brendan a little bit last podcast, but when you're an adult and these things are happening, and I feel like you have your right to choose on what you want to do.
Right.
I'm against it 100%.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to force someone else to be against it.
Right.
But when they started forcing it on the kids that didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Sick.
I mean, I feel like it's borderline child abuse.
Absolutely.
And I was up in arms. I had multiple conversations with friends like that, they would bash the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, but like, are you still sending your kid to school?
Yeah. And
they're like, well, yeah, what else am I supposed to do? And I'm like, well, that's the problem.
I know.
Like what are you supposed to do? Stay home and not go to work?
Right.
Like
it was a tough situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was really, so that email came out. And so I'm calling up every, friends that are physicians and saying, okay, what am I missing? Because I really didn't want to be taking an emotional approach or a political approach. Like, I wanted to put that aside and just think, okay, what is the actual science?
Yeah.
Even if the science does prove it, I mean, it still shouldn't be mandated because we live in America. But still, I wanted to make sure, am I way off base? And so I'm talking to everyone else I know, and they're all saying the same thing. Like, yeah, you're right. I can't provide you with any research to back up really why we should be doing this. And so I actually put out a social media post that said something along the lines of basically masking healthy elementary children is BS.
Yeah.
And I put that up at like midnight, and I woke up in the morning and it had been shared like 1,200 times, which for me, you know, in my little sphere of influence, I was like, holy crap,
like,
this is getting traction. You know, I wasn't anticipating that. And of course there was all sorts of comments, a lot of people actually supportive, but then the trolls, the typical trolls of, you're murdering people, you're killing my grandma, right? By not wanting to
California.
Exactly, right. But the interesting thing, that was actually kind of the tipping point for me, because my family was calling me saying, and friends saying, you need to take this post down. You're going to get fired. You could lose your business. And here I was 9 months pregnant at the time. I'm the breadwinner for my family. And there's a lot of fear speaking out as a medical professional.
Sure.
And so I'll be honest, I took it down for a few hours. And those few hours, it was actually in the evening, I could not sleep that whole night. I felt sick to my stomach. And I had a pretty profound experience that was like, no, you need to put that post up. You need to keep speaking truth. Your voice needs to be heard.
Yeah.
And so I put it back up, and I knew that was the right thing. I made a very conscious decision at that point to fear God more than man.
Yeah.
And come what may, maybe I'll lose my job. Maybe I'll lose my business. Who knows? But I have to follow my conscience. And so it was interesting. Of course, inevitably, someone reported me to the hospital. I got a call a few days later from the hospital administrator. And so, you know, of course, there was some backlash from it. People weren't happy, but I did not take that post down. I did not stop speaking truth. And really, that was kind of the tipping point that propelled me forward to speak publicly. I've had actually some pretty good opportunities over the last year to speak out publicly at public events against mandates, and very strong for liberty and truth. And so it was the right thing.
What's that conversation even like with a hospital administrator? Like, I just don't understand. Like, so I disagree with someone so they can call my boss and try and get me fired. I just don't.
That's been
where does that even go?
Right. Like, that's the most bizarre thing about this whole situation, of how all of the sudden you're not allowed to have a different opinion anymore. And especially in medicine, seeing how science is being censored. When have medical doctors been censored? I mean, you saw how quickly America's frontline doctors was just scrubbed from every inch of the internet, yet like we can't do that with child pornography.
Right.
I mean, we still have child porn everywhere, but we can scrub a bunch of doctors giving their medical opinion. Are you like, what country do we live in? It's out of control. And so, yeah, I mean, there wasn't anything illegal, right, about what I did, but basically they just made sure that I was following the hospital's social media policies. You can't have any pictures of yourself taken on their campus and things like that. So I went through all my social media and made sure whatever pictures were ever taken on the campus were taken down. But my opinion, my views are still there.
Sure.
And I mean, freedom of speech. We got the First Amendment for a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
And they can censor whatever they want, but then we get censored if we have an opinion.
Right.
And I mean, you can take down the president of the United States of the time, right? And that's where I was at with it, like the child porn stuff or whatever. I mean, take it whatever direction you want. Like you can literally like ban the president of the United States to be on social media.
Right.
But then there's all of these other things that are still going on. And you just never worded it as they allowed it.
Right.
But once they can not allow something, then they're obviously allowing the rest.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah. It's the whole thing. It's just it's so obvious. And the thing about, I mean, it has to come down to freedom. And no matter if you agree with masks or vaccines or Trump or whatever, it shouldn't matter. The information should be allowed to be shared. And, you know, you saw how with the whole election, how, I mean, they've come out now, it's public knowledge that it was skewed with the way the media was portraying everything and hiding the scandals that Biden had and lying about things with Trump. And I mean, the media controls the masses, right?
100%.
Control the media, control the masses.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And they, like with the COVID stuff and the COVID deaths, it was interesting to me how, like on ESPN, you have that bottom ticker always going, telling you the scores and whatnot.
Yeah, total tactic.
And everything was, you know, deaths under Trump, basically, and they would scroll that 24/7.
Right.
The second he's out, you never hear about it again.
Let's pull that. We don't need to focus on that anymore. Let's turn down, you know, the PCR test. We don't need everyone testing positive. Biden's in now. We're good.
We're good. Love it. So that's kind of your big step into the city council then, is what you kind of saw coming down the pipe a year and a half ago.
Yeah, and it made me realize how vital it is that we are involved in our local communities. We so often get sidetracked and focused on what's happening at the national level with the federal government, which we all know is a crap show. Mm-hmm. And we fail to recognize, though, that the biggest influence and impact over our day-to-day lives is actually our local communities. Actually, it's our sheriff is the biggest influence. You've got to make sure that we have a good sheriff. You see what's happening in LA County right now, where basically you can't leave your house without a vaccine passport. But thank goodness for their sheriff who came out and was like, yeah, we're not enforcing this.
Yeah, good luck.
And, you know, so you've got to have a good sheriff. But even just our local city councils, which is what I'm running for, our mayors, our county commissioners, those are the people, and your governor too, but especially at the local level, who you need to make sure they are defending your God-given rights. And that's what I want to hear from politicians who are people who are running for office. So often it just becomes this popularity contest of,
last names.
You know, this is my background. I go to this church, you know, vote for me. I'm a nice person. Who the hell cares about your background? What have you done and what are you going to do to defend our God-given rights? Because that's the proper role of government.
Right.
It's to protect the citizens' life, liberty, property. Outside of that is usurpation of power. And that's what we need to get back to, is the proper role of government. And so that's really been my passion, is realizing that the hope for this country lies in our local communities. So through the course of this last year, I've been very prayerful about it of, okay, what can I do to make a difference? Because we do sometimes feel just like, you know, what can I do? I'm one person, right? Like we talked about. Yeah, exactly. And really the answer to my prayers was service. And that's where I got guided to public service and service above self, right? So lose yourself in the service of others. That's actually the words that came to me after one of my prayers. And so I felt like this was the right thing. I knew when I told my husband, hey, I'm thinking about running for office, I fully expected him to be like, are you kidding me? We don't have time for this. We're going to lose money. Like, why on earth would we do this? But actually, he was the opposite and was like, that's what you're supposed to do. I back you 100%. You need to do it. And that's when I was like, okay, this is the right thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Having a supportive spouse, you know, in anything.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
huge.
I mean, whether he cooks really good or not.
Right. He does have, a lot of bonuses going for him.
So what do you think needs to happen then? I mean, what can we even control on a city level?
Yeah.
You know, because we actually threw a big banquet dinner last year for a classmate that had attempted suicide. And I was kind of panicking because we had raised this money. We had food bought. We had the venue booked. We had everything going. And I started hearing from people in the governor's office that he was going to shut everything down.
Oh, geez.
And I was panicking. And I was like, screw it. We're doing it anyway.
Yeah,
like, come stop us.
That's what we need.
And
massive noncompliance.
Well, and then so we had the dinner, and I think it was we had it on Saturday, and the next Monday was when they started coming down with the, I don't know if you want to call them a lockdown. I mean, they're like, everyone's locked down unless you're essential, and pretty much everybody's essential.
Right. Yeah. So. Like the audacity of government to decide who's essential and non-essential. Right. I mean, like, seriously, what world do we live in that you can go stand in the crowds of Walmart? That's totally fine. But, you know, the mom and pop business down the street, sorry, that's not safe. Yeah. Your few customers, that's totally not safe. Let's instead funnel everyone into the same store. That makes a lot of freaking sense.
Well, and the growth from the main corporations in the country was insane.
Oh, yeah.
And people don't understand, and both of us being business owners, right? I assume we get it. Yeah. Like, we're the backbone of the nation.
Absolutely.
And so shutting all of us down, which I didn't get shut down. I mean, my life went on.
I refused to shut down. Yeah. Technically, I probably should have, according to their rules at the time, but no, absolutely not. Yeah. You cannot tell me that I don't get to provide for my family. Sorry.
Exactly.
So yeah, I stayed open. I had in fact, still have a sign on my door that says constitutionally compliant business, mask choice. I never enforced masks, and I never will.
Yeah. Well, when they came out with the sign you had to put on your business saying you're required to wear a mask or whatever it was.
The Safe Utah program. I'm sure you got it as a business owner too, the email saying,
put that crap up.
Oh, hell no.
Like, I had people are like, dude, are you going to put that sign up? Well, I would have conversations with people going back and forth being like, this is not right. They can't do this. Yeah. Like, what are they going to do? Like, put the National Guard in front of my business? Like, how else are you going to stop me from going in? And I was having these conversations. And you know, my buddies are like, hell yeah, you're right, you know? Yeah. And then we'd show up to their businesses and they would have that sign up on the door. And I'm like,
guys,
dude,
come on.
I guess we're not on the same page here.
Right.
And you don't have it? And I'm like, heck no. No. And I mean, granted, I'm like a very small safe store. So I mean, you know, I'm not a big time company like a couple of these guys I was talking to. Yeah. And I was like, well, I'm not going to put that up. They can try to come shut me down if they want to. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a $10,000 fine is what they were trying to threaten. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who's going to get charged $10,000? Name one person that got charged $10,000 for not having that sign up.
My one of my doctor friends, he's amazing. He did get fined because he never wore a mask throughout the whole thing. And one of his employees actually reported him.
Dang.
Right. And so they tried to fine him, and I love his response. The government official or whatever came in to inspect and, you know, give him the fine. And he said, you can go tell your boss, Governor Cox, that he can come down here and kiss my mule Buttercup's ass. Like, literally, that's what he told them. And guess what? He fought it and he won.
Right. Well, that's where I was getting to is like, come and fine us, and then we'll just prove that it's unconstitutional extremely easy. Right. And there's people all around the country that were doing that, but you never heard about any of that, right? Right. Like we were talking about how the media controls everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, there's the one that was actually publicized because of him and the people that followed him was I think it's Ian Smith. Yeah,
the gym owner. Yeah.
New Jersey, I think.
Yes, I do remember that.
And he was getting fined like hundreds of thousands of dollars a day.
Yeah.
And
out of control.
Yeah. And it was like, you want to know how much of that he's going to end up paying? Zero.
Yeah.
He's not going to pay any of that.
Yeah. And we need people like that to take a stand, because ultimately government gains its power from the consent of the governed. We have to stop consenting. End of story.
Yeah. When it all hit, I think everyone had a slight right to have fear.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, the images they're showing us of people like falling over dead.
Right.
And so I totally understand where the fear came from.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, well, I'm still going on with my everyday life.
Right.
And it seems like everyone's still okay. Like I own 2 contract mail routes with the post office.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were still having to go out every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still working every day at the post office. And I'm like, if there's not a lot of places in the nation that's transmitting more germs than, you know.
That's a good point, there's like right?
Over a dozen people that touch pieces of mail that by the time it gets to me and I deliver it.
Right.
And so I'm like, if anyone's going to get it, like the post office is all going to die. Like everyone will die.
Right.
And we kind of all talked about it, and it was like, okay, there's all this fear. And then I started seeing the stake getting driven, and it was like they're trying to divide. And it was extremely early that I was like, okay, this is not okay. We all need to like get our tunnel vision out of the way, and we need to see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And the biggest way to govern or control a population is with fear.
Fear. Absolutely.
And everywhere that you look, they're just pumping fear and pumping fear. And I was hoping I wasn't wrong, because I was extremely vocal about how I felt about it.
Good for you.
And like anybody that talked to me, and I'm not big time, don't get me wrong. I mean, you've got a lot bigger influence than I do.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I wasn't voted the most likely to go on city council.
You probably would be, though. You put your hat in the ring.
And so, but anyway, so I was always like, man, I kind of hope I'm right, because I'd hate to eat my words on all of this. But, but I was very vocal about it. I mean, when you see Amanda next, you can ask her, because she's heard plenty of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I always joke with her. I'm like, well, you have a medical background. I've got a Facebook fact background. I get all my facts on social media.
Has Amanda been on your side, or has she kind of been like, whoa, honey?
In that aspect, she's the grounding one.
Yeah.
Like I'll get off on a tangent and just rip for a half hour.
Yeah.
And then she'll be the one that's like, okay, relax. Like we still have to live our life, you know?
Right. And yeah, I mean, my whole thing, like I've never come out and said, don't wear a mask, don't get a vaccine. You know, people like to mislabel me sometimes as a anti-mask or anti-vaxxer. I am not any of those things, actually. I see benefit in situations for both of those things. Where my issue comes in, though, is when government is trying to force that on you. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach like they're trying to do right now. Yeah. And so that's really where my passion comes in, is don't you dare try to mandate what goes on my child, you know, in my body. That is not the role of government, period. And that's what I'm fighting for.
So if let's just hypothetically, let's say not even the federal government, let's just say, well, I guess he is, like Cox, right? Like, so he would govern us, right?
Yeah.
And so if he puts a mandate on Utah, can St. George go against? I mean, how does that tear down work?
That's what made me so frustrated last year, is silence in the face of tyranny is dangerous. And that's what we saw amongst our elected officials last 100%. Year, is silence. There was no accountability. I was very involved in trying to get the mandates out of schools. So I was, you know, emailing, calling on the phone, the governor's office, the health department, our local government here, you know, sending letters, sending studies, because the studies did not back up this mandate. And so I would say, tell me what you're following, because you are not following the science. And actually, to their credit, most of them would get back to me and they would say, you're right. I agree with you, but my hands are tied. You know, the governor's office would say, our hands are tied. It's the health department. The health department would say, our hands are tied. It's the school districts. The school districts would say, our hands are tied. It's the governor's office. There was zero accountability. And that's when I realized we have to have local leaders who will take a hard stand and place principle over popularity, because that's what it all comes down to. They were all scared.
Sure.
They didn't want people to, you know, hate them.
No one wants it pinned on them.
Right, exactly. And so we need someone to stand up and say, no, not in my town. I don't care what you say, Governor Cox. I'm not enforcing that in my town. And we as a city actually do have the power to say that. I mean, the city council controls the police department. The local police department is under the jurisdiction of the mayor and the city council. And so we absolutely have a say. And no, we are not enforcing this.
Yeah, because it comes down to being who's enforcing what.
Exactly.
And what you get in trouble for.
I guess. And I guess, you know, the fear could be, oh, we're going to lose funding for something, right? Well, why are we even getting federal funds? When you get federal funds, you are the slave, the biatch to the federal government. I don't want to be that. I want to be as independent, as far away from that as possible. So let's stop taking that money.
Yeah.
How about that?
Stop getting told what to do to get funded.
Exactly.
Follow the dollar.
Yeah,
that's my favorite term. Follow the dollar.
Yes. It's with everything, right?
So everyone's like, well, I just don't understand why this is happening. I'm like, well, who's making money on it?
Yep. That's what you got to look at for
who's
sure.
Who's taking money? Who's making money? Where's it going? Sure.
Yep. I mean, even with the masks in the schools, because they wanted that federal dollar. Exactly. And they had to enforce the masks to do it. Sick. They did that to our children, you know?
Yeah. I mean, Sick. More people should be pissed off about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't even have a kid in school. So like, I would always kind of keep it to myself around my friends, because I was like, well, I don't even have a kid and I don't have to stay home and take care of them if they're not in school. Like, I'm not playing that role.
Yeah.
But I had pitched an idea and we talked about it was, well, we have friends that are teachers or have been teachers and moved on because of their salary.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, why don't we get one of these guys? We'll tell them we'll pay them $50,000.
Right.
We'll get 30 of us
or
30 kids together, and he can just basically homeschool them.
Right.
And I'm sure there's some legalities
we
around
are
it.
seeing that actually now. There's been a lot of homeschool programs pop up over this. This is actually, as far as homeschooling goes, this is the headquarters here in Southern Utah. We actually are amazing with our homeschool programs. And so, but yeah, same thing. Yeah. I think a lot of them did pop up this last year with that same concept.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I barely graduated high school, so I'm not the guy to do it. But I was like, there's got to be someone that can.
You need to teach the entrepreneurship, and you totally have something to offer there.
I don't know, but I don't know. It's just mind-boggling to me how we allowed ourselves to get controlled, and then I would have conversations with people, and I'm fairly open to other things, you know?
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll get a little passionate.
Mm-hmm. No.
But for the most part, I would listen to people and I'm just like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then, I would state like what I think's going on and what I can prove's going on.
Yeah.
And the misinformation is out of this world.
Totally.
They're flip-flopping left and right. And so I'm like, guys, that's a sign that maybe you should start thinking for yourself. Like, turn off the TV, care about the person next to you.
Yeah.
Like like you're saying, I love the whole local thing.
Yeah.
Like, take care of everyone around us, make sure everyone's taken care of, and move down the road.
Right. And I believe that's really our only hope moving forward in this country, is having those small, strong local communities, because we see what's going on in the federal government right now. It's, if you can steal an election, what can't you do? Right. And so as things do get uglier, I hate to sound like a doomsdayer, but just in reality, as we see things continue to spread fire, we have to safeguard our local communities. That's the future. Is I think we're going to have these strong communities. And I think we do live in a very special place here. I really do.
I agree.
That I think we have a hopeful future despite of the craziness going on in the rest of the country.
There's definitely places that I feel like are too far gone. That I don't know if they'll ever recover.
Right.
And if they do, it'll be because, look at what is it, Seattle or Oregon? It's like they're like a war zone over there.
Right. Yeah. I think it's maybe somewhat improved since, 6 months ago or however.
Blocking off.
It's out of control.
Yeah.
It really is.
Let me ask you this, because you kind of said it and I've had these conversations too. So whether you believe the election was fixed or not, whatever.
Right.
Believe what you want to believe.
Right.
I almost think that it would have been more negative to prove that it was fixed than allowing it to go, because at that point, I don't want to say mess with the integrity of the election. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But if you prove that it could have been messed with, what can of worms does that open?
Then what does that say about America? Yeah. That's a good point, because if we've lost faith in that system, that really, it crumbles everything about our whole system, our whole republic.
And the big thing, and I believe it was a big swinging part of it, but the mail-in ballots. Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, well, there's so many other reports about the machines being hacked and malfunctioning and all this stuff too. Yeah. And so I'm like, is it really even the mail-in stuff, or is it not?
Well, like Arizona, you've probably seen all the things recently that they're showing now in Arizona, and it was a combination. They're showing fraud in all different areas of the election. So it's crazy.
How do you think that happens? They just go top down. I mean, they just get so many people involved that they just push it. I mean, that's a big scale. I mean, the nation, that's a big scale.
Right. And it kind of comes back to, too, I mean, I don't want to sound too conspiracy theorist, right? But I mean, you kind of got to be living in a box to not realize that there's a deep state, that there's elites pulling the strings. I absolutely believe that.
Yeah. Like back to Amazon gets to function and Walmart gets to function and Costco gets to function.
Right.
And the net worth of Amazon went up $42 billion, I think is what it was.
Yep. But
billion with a B.
All these small businesses are gone, eradicated.
And not only that, we're gonna print money and give it to you.
Yeah.
And so you can still pay your employees. It's like, well, just let us be open.
Right.
Let us be open.
Right.
And so I don't have to go stand in a line of 100 people at Walmart. It doesn't make any sense.
It did not make any sense. And even just, there are so many things that we went down to Tahiti Village. I actually made a video a rant while I was down there because I was so mad. That was almost exactly a year ago. And here, we pay this resort fee, and I did expect they'd probably be trying to enforce masks. I certainly didn't think they'd be trying to enforce them by the swimming pool. We were literally told that we had to wear a mask unless we were submerged in the water. And then they narrowed normally there's a bunch of entrances and exits. They narrowed it all down to one. So everyone's funneling in and out of the same spot. So you're getting way more contact with more people. And they said that's because of COVID. And then, we pay this resort fee and they're not even letting us use the amenities. We go to get in the pool. Oh, sorry, we have our max number of people by the pool right now. I lost it. I lost my marbles on that one. It's so ridiculous.
So I think it can't keep going this way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't believe that America is going to allow it to go this way. And you hear about the silent majority and the different terms to describe that.
Right.
And I don't even know if the silent majority is going to get us out of it or not. I'm trying to think, is it Southwest, the pilots?
Yep. My dad's actually a pilot. I was talking to him about this today.
So explain it a little bit, because I'm sure you know more. I just heard about this today.
Yeah, and it's honestly pretty recent for me too. I think it was all kind of yesterday or the day before maybe, that it was going down. So yeah, I was asking my dad, who's a pilot for another airline, not Southwest. And yeah, basically what these pilots are doing is they are organizing, and they're all calling in sick at the same time as kind of a protest.
Sure.
Because they do have to be careful about the way they're doing it. But I love to see that. I love to see, and they're starting to put out public videos and things like that. I've seen
pilots
and airline employees.
So are they being forced to be vaccinated?
Yes,
is that what's going on?
Yeah, okay. They're trying to do that, right? And so that's their protest against it. And thank goodness for people like that, because guess what? The next thing is you're going to have to show your vaccine passport in order to fly. Mm-hmm. It's already, my dad was in Hawaii yesterday, and he was telling me how upset he was because everywhere he went, and the funny thing is my dad is vaccinated, but he's like, I'm not going to show them my proof of vaccination. No way am I going to do that. And so he couldn't go to the gym because he wouldn't show his vaccine passport. He had to eat just strictly outside, take out food from a window, couldn't go in any restaurant. Like, we are living in communism. Literally.
I know.
How is this happening? And that's in Hawaii. That's in the United States of America that's happening.
I go to the extreme, and I'm like, and I don't want to be insensitive, and I don't mean it that way, but I feel like, one thing I've always said, the Delta variant was the thing, a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm like, well, wait till the Echo variant comes out, and the Foxtrot variant. And
that's what viruses do. There's going to always mutate. Be, that's been my thing with COVID too, is it's not going anywhere. Sure. So we can't pretend like, oh, everyone just stay locked up inside your house for 2 weeks and this thing's just going to disappear.
Yeah.
No, that's not how viruses work. We still have to move on. And I'll be the first to say that COVID is serious.
Sure.
I've had a 39-year-old uncle die from COVID. early on. It's been about a year ago now. And, you know, so I've known from the beginning and just treating COVID, like this is a real thing. It's not the sniffles from a lot of people, right? But that doesn't change the fact that people are always going to die of something. I mean, look at heart disease, #1 killer, but yet should we mandate the foods people eat? Should we mandate you get your butt to the gym every day? Because more people are taking up hospital beds from being obese than they are from having COVID. So this whole argument of we have to mandate a vaccine so you don't take up a hospital bed is the stupidest argument I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I mean, that opens the can of worms for everything then that we can mandate, right? So you don't take up a hospital bed.
I've always been going through the list of deaths and I'm like, so yeah, foods, we're not worried about this. We're not worried about heart disease. We're not worried about cancer. We're not worried. And I'm going down this whole thing and I'm like, now we're down to like the 40th thing that's COVID.
Right.
and
it's serious, you know, it can be very serious, of course, but like, it's our responsibility to take whatever precautions we deem fit for ourselves, for our families. I mean, even with the vaccine argument, people can still transmit COVID if you've been vaccinated. That's why I think it's funny that everyone's like, I'm getting my vaccine to protect you. It's like, no, you're getting it to protect yourself because statistically, you're far less likely to be hospitalized or die, right? So you're protecting you. Great. I love that you have that available to you. Don't you dare try to force that on someone else, though. Yeah.
So with your background, explain to me, I don't even believe it's a vaccine. I don't think that's the right way to classify it.
Yeah. So, and this is something that I've delved into a lot, right? Because gene therapy, right? I don't know if you follow Dr. Robert Malone. He was one of the inventors of mRNA technology, and he worked in a gene therapy lab. And so, you know, I do see that argument of, you know, this is gene therapy, right? Not true vaccination. But I do feel like it's not a bad thing. I'm not in the camp of, oh my gosh, this is going to kill everyone and this is altering your DNA and
you're going to be sterile and all that stuff.
Yeah. I think that there's fear mongering on both sides.
Sure. Divide. Yeah.
Totally. That's what it is. And unfortunately, and there's a lot of misinformation on both sides. And so it makes me frustrated, honestly, because I find myself being able to see both sides. And I have friends who are like extreme on both sides, and I love them all to death. I mean, I can disagree with someone all day long. I still love you. But it's hard to see people fall so easily into the misinformation on both sides. And so, you know, I'm not in the camp of thinking that, no, this is, you know, not a vaccine. It's going to kill everyone. But we also have to look at all of the science. What about natural immunity? That's the thing that blows my mind, that all of these medical professionals who profess to follow science are somehow ignoring natural immunity. And now multiple 15 plus studies have proven natural immunity is superior to vaccine immunity. So why on earth would we mandate someone with natural immunity get a vaccine that, by the way, you're more likely to have a vaccine reaction if you've had the natural infection? So why are we going to make someone, and I'm all for if you still want to get a vaccine, if you've had the natural infection, sure, there is one study that shows some benefit if you've had natural infection getting one dose of vaccine afterward. There is one study that shows some benefit. Hey, great. I'm all for it. You've got that choice, right? But myself, I have natural immunity. I have robust immunity. No way are you going to force me to get a vaccine that I could have side effects for, that we have no long-term safety studies for. No, it's not going to happen. You will not force me to do that. I will not comply.
When I talk about it with friends, I'm like, we are the test. Like, we are the test subjects right now. There hasn't been enough time.
Yeah, there was phase
do
3, phase 4 trials that are still going on right now.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. That whole thing blows my mind. I was going to touch on when we talk about I take things to the extreme. I'm always like, when do we line up for the train cars? Like when people talk about it, I'm like, so have you ever looked into history about when we've had to walk around and show papers before?
Exactly. Yeah. We went from literally 2 weeks to slow the curve to show me your papers within a matter of months. And many people still aren't blinking an eye over that. They think it's totally fine.
And like whether that's where it's going or not, that should still be on someone's mind. Like they should still understand the history of these same events happening and where it led.
Do you remember Eichmann from, the term little Eichmann? Is that something you're familiar with? That's a term that I've used a lot over this last year. And again, like I get that it might be taking it to an extreme.
Right.
But you look at different professions and, I'll use my profession because that's, the things that I see. And medical professionals, they're some of the most amazing people I know. And so it blows my mind the inhumane things that, and I'm not saying my personal colleagues, but just in general, the medical profession, what they've allowed over this last year to allow people to die alone. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If you can have multiple healthcare workers going in and out of those patients' rooms all day long wearing PPE, you sure as hell can have their family member go in and be with their family member. It is absolutely inhumane to let people die alone or to separate children from their parents in hospital settings. That's happened as well. And you think about the healthcare workers who are enforcing that. It is little Eichmann type behavior. Eichmann was, for those who aren't familiar with him, was the guy in World War II who, he's responsible for millions of deaths. He was transporting Jews to the gas chambers. And when he was caught after the war, he said, "Oh, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just following orders. I was just following orders." And that's what is really scary to me over this last year. And again, I realize that's taking it to an extreme, but it's the same concept. If we are going to enforce inhumane things in our profession or just in general allow these even vaccine passports and just say, "Oh, I'm just following orders." Guess what? The law is not always moral. Look at our history, right?
Sure.
Like just because something's legal doesn't mean it's moral.
I don't know. It kind of freaks me out when I go down the road and see where it ends.
Yeah. I do have hope, though. I do want to say, even with the doom and gloom we're talking about, I still have a lot of hope, actually.
Talking to people like you makes me have more hope because sometimes I feel like I'm on an island.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and being in the gun community and being a Republican and being on all those sides of the street that I'm on, I get fed that stuff more and more and more.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, where you can kind of see both sides.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of times I'm like, okay, let's think about this.
Right.
Like my grandpa, that's what he'd always say. And I'm basically my grandpa in younger form. And so I'm always like,
I love it.
Okay, let's think about this for a second. And then I'm like, okay, you guys said this, you said this, and we try and find a conclusion between it. Right. And I don't know. Talking to you makes me feel like I'm not the only person that's sitting here saying, do you guys not understand this?
Yeah.
It's like communism, right? Like
totally.
That's the other thing is we have Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, and I'm like, this ends in communism. That's the last variant. It's communism.
Yeah, absolutely. We're there in some areas. Look at Hawaii. It's crazy.
And I talked to a guy the other day from Chicago, and he was telling me all about all the stuff out in Chicago that they're doing. And they're going back to shutdowns and masks.
Wow, unbelievable.
So he did a ton of research. So he'd retired. They could pretty much go wherever they wanted. He had researched everywhere in the nation, and he had decided to move to St. George, Utah.
Wow.
And so I was talking to him, and he was like, yeah, you guys believe in this, and you believe in this, and you guys protect this and protect this. And he's like, if there's a place that I researched that I thought would go down last, it was going to be this place. Yeah. And so it made me feel like, okay, like maybe we're not as...
I think that's spot on. This is a special place, and I have felt that really profoundly, especially over the last year or so. It's funny that you say that about that guy because just yesterday or the day before, I had a client from France.
Okay.
And she was so funny. I was actually wearing a shirt that said socialism distancing. And she's like, "Oh, I like your politics." She says, "That's where you're headed, right?" She's like, "That's why I came from France, but that's where you're headed." And I said, "Absolutely. That's why I'm taking a stand and trying to prevent this from happening in my local community." And she said the same thing, though, that she moved to this area because she felt inspired, like that this was going to be, out of all the areas, the area that would stand up for things.
So taking this international, and I was going to get here, So let's just go there now. So I do believe that a lot of the virus, COVID, Chinese flu, whatever you want to call it,
right.
Was political. I think a lot of it was political. If that's the case, though, how is this like a worldwide thing? Like, and do we control that much sway in the world? Do you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because the one thing I always go back to is like, okay, was this part of swaying an election? Did they just take advantage of it? And it was going to happen regardless, and they took advantage of it?
Right. Well, yeah, the never let a good tragedy go to waste,
exactly,
right, is what they say.
Exactly. And I would have these conversations with people, and I would say, like, well, yeah, but, like, Italy doesn't give a crap who our president
is. Worldwide.
Yeah, like, that's not just going on here.
Right.
So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think they just took advantage of it?
I do, and I do think that more than likely it came from a lab. That's really what, and it's so funny because whistleblowers from China early on, you know, all the way back January 2020, December 2019, were saying this came from the lab, and they were being silenced. They were being threatened. They were losing their medical license. They were being just completely defamed and labeled conspiracy theorists. And, you know, now a year later or whatever, it's like, oh, yeah, actually, it does look like the evidence is pointing that direction, huh? You know, so I do think there was probably, whether by accident, on purpose, I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but I do know that absolutely the evil forces of the world are taking full advantage of this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you look back on the rallies and everything that was going on during the election, I can't look at anybody square in the face and say, I believe that Biden won the election fair and square.
There's no way.
I mean, there's like 5 people that would show up to a rally and Trump would fill a football stadium.
Yeah, no way. And to say that he got more votes than any president in history, like that alone, even without all the evidence, is like, I mean, just common sense. No way.
Yeah, it's not possible.
No way.
And then they would just drive it on, well, everyone hates Trump. That's why we voted for Biden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that many people hate Trump, huh? And it's like you're going back on your stance, what we talked about in the beginning. And I was going to say, you know, you took it down, you had some pressures. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, but that's the thing, is there's always going to be that opposition.
Always.
And I've always said, like, take a stance, because 50% of the people are going to hate you anyway.
Exactly.
Like, they're going to disagree with you anyway.
So true.
And I bet you felt like there was more people supporting you than were against you, especially in our little community.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I do feel like overall I've had like 95% support, right? But there's still that 5% of opposition, or, you know, trolls on the internet.
Yeah.
You know, the unfortunate thing that does actually make me sad, I have a really thick skin and let things roll off, but it has been sad that colleagues that I actually thought were really good friends have kind of turned against me a little bit. And really, I think it just comes down to they are misclassifying me. You know, I get labeled a quote anti-vaxxer, even though I'm absolutely not against the vaccine. I'm anti-mandate. Yeah. I am pro-science. Like, let's look at natural immunity. Let's look at the fact that more children are being hospitalized post-vaccine than they are with COVID. I mean, you have to be willing to look at all sides. And that's what really bothers me in the medical community right now, that so many have their blinders on to anything that the CDC won't admit. And because I fall into that more vocal category of speaking against mandates, a lot of people who I thought were friends have kind of put me into that category of, oh, she must be against us because she's vocal against this. Yeah. So it's sad, but...
And there's people on both sides.
There are.
I've talked to medical people on both sides.
Yeah.
And I've heard from, you know, people that I would trust that are around medical people from both sides.
Right.
And that's fine. And it's like we're saying, like, if you are more than welcome to agree or think how you want to think.
Right.
But that's the problem, is like, what sounds like me and you, like
Yeah.
people like us, we're not allowed to think that because we get silenced and we get our bosses called. Luckily, I don't have a boss. So
Right, smart.
if you want to have a problem with me, give me a call and we'll have
Yes.
a talk about it at me.
And that's the thing, like you mentioned, that, medical professionals on both sides who think, even similarly to me. And actually, I think a lot of them actually do think a lot like I do, but there's so much fear.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be the black sheep of the medical community, like I guess I've kind of become in some ways. And nobody wants to be labeled that, or, I'm not your friend anymore. You're not one of us. I've been told that by someone.
Jeez.
So nobody wants that in their life. I get it. But we still, at the end of the day, we have to fear God more than man. We have to follow our conscience and do the right thing. When we don't have to all agree, like I'm totally fine if people adamantly disagree with me. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. We
Sure.
can still have a conversation. That's been the sad thing about some colleagues is they've literally told me, I don't have a desire to even talk to you. They won't even have a conversation to even really know where I stand on things.
Well, and that's why I think people would have a hard time making the stand that you have.
Yeah.
And luckily you've got thick enough skin that you're
Right.
still standing.
Yeah. I'll keep going. No, I mean, you can't push me down. Sorry. I'm going to keep going.
The problem with the whole thing is like when the NBA got shut down, and that's when I kind of started seeing the whole trickle effect to everybody. And then it was like I'm LDS. So like the LDS church started coming out with like the shut church down
Right.
And
but bars can be open. That's okay. The liquor store can be open, but
that's essential.
Church, no.
Liquor store is essential.
Right.
But
Priorities.
I would look at it and be like, it's because nobody wants to be blamed.
Yeah.
Like nobody wants to be like, well, I contracted COVID in your establishment or the NBA is spreading it or whatever it was. And I mean, that's how the whole thing started was old Rudy Gobert started touching all the mics, like making fun of COVID. And then he ends up getting COVID.
Yeah.
and then all the sports started shutting down.
Right.
And that was the conversations I was having was like, okay, if they're taking, like, if the NBA is taking that kind of stand to a business that does billions, if not trillions of dollars.
Right.
If they're doing that and shutting down, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah. Good point.
And I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of an extreme end game looking at things. And that's where I was like, well, try to come shut us down.
Yeah.
And I had a talk with a specific business owner locally that they did shut down and because they were deemed non-essential. Right. And I told him, I said, so what happens? Like, go to work. What happens?
Right.
And he's like, well, they'll fine me. And I was like, so what?
Rip it up.
Yeah. I'm like,
nope, not
I
happening.
promise you will never pay that fine.
Yeah.
If they force you to pay that fine, I'll pay it for you. I'm like, I promise you it won't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm like, go to work, open your store. Well, they'll pull my business license, is what he said. I was like, dude, the city of St. George doesn't allow you to have a business when it comes down to it, right? Like I understand the whole part of it,
right?
But I'm like, this doesn't come down to them saying, hey, you don't have a business license anymore. You can no longer be open because COVID shut you down.
Right.
And we went down this rabbit hole of like, so then what? So then what?
Yeah.
And I was like, so this ends with the military standing in front of your door, not letting you in.
Right.
And I don't know. I was hoping it would never get to that. And I'm sure it did some places in the country.
That's where it comes down to the proper role of government and why it is so vital that we hold in the reins and we get back to that protection of life, liberty, and property. Because guess what? Those rights come from God, inalienable rights. And that's cited everywhere in our founding documents from our founders. Those rights do not come from government. And if we accept that they come from government, well, then we're also accepting government can take it away.
Sure.
And I will never accept that.
Yeah, me neither.
Never.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's scary. But I like everything goes back to God, and I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is really, I think, why we're in the place that we are is the lack of God.
Yeah, well, they're breaking it down, whoever they are.
Right.
But
Yeah, we have to acknowledge. And I mean, I'm all for separation of church and state, right? I would never say, oh, we have to institutionalize this nationwide specific church. No, that's not what it's about. But that doesn't mean that we can't acknowledge God, a higher presence, because of exactly what we were saying earlier, where our rights come from, the divinity of that. Everyone, no matter what you believe, even if you're atheist, you can still believe that our rights are divine and don't come from government.
Yeah. When are they still doing like the Pledge of Allegiance in schools? Didn't they shut that down, or are they still doing that?
They still do it here.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I don't know.
My like the one nation under God thing, right? Like that was the big...
that's even it's
well, so that's what I was getting, is they chip and they chip and they chip and they chip.
Trying to take away God.
And that's a lot of the people on my side of the aisle, that's how they see it.
Right.
You know, you're going after, if it's going to be guns, if it's going to be just your God-given rights to be able to function, you know, be able to leave your house.
Right.
And so we see it like, no, I'm not going to hand this over because I see where this leads.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem too with, you know, kind of coming back to that proper role of government, is people get into office, or even us as citizens, and we see these flowery ideas of like, oh yeah, of course we want every kid to have free lunch, right? I'll just use that for an example. Like, that sounds great, right? Who wouldn't want a kid to have free lunch? And so, okay, yeah, government is now going to provide free lunch for all children. Sounds like a great idea, but let's run that through the actual filter of what is government's role. Is it government's role to provide food to everyone? I mean, when you take it down to its basic form of, your neighbor has 2 cars, you don't have a car. Do we have the right to forcibly take that extra car and redistribute it to the person who doesn't have a car? I mean, it's the right thing to do, right? You have extra, they don't have one. No, that is completely immoral. That's called theft. And that's what's going on every single day in our government, even our local government. Like, why do we have private businesses and government? Why do we have golf courses? Anything that competes with the private sector, the government should not have their hand in.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that.
Period. And so we really just need to take it back to the basics. And that's why we're at where we're at right now. A guy that I have a lot of respect for, about a year ago, I heard him say, the reason why we're at where we are in the country right now, do you know how we got there? We got there one city park at a time. And it sounds, you know, city park, like we all want parks, right?
Sure.
Like you get together as a community and you say, yeah, we want the taxpayers to fund this park. We all love parks. But you keep doing and building upon things like that. And obviously the park is, you know, just kind of a very small, you know, example. But when you look at that, it's true. That's how we build to get to this place to where now all of a sudden you can't leave your house without injecting something into your body.
Yeah.
And people think that's totally reasonable. That's how we got here.
Well, that's I think the biggest problem is just depending on the government, whether that's, you know, for food, for housing, for, you know, whatever money side of it is.
Right.
But the problem is you get dependent on the government, and then you have someone come in and says, hey, I'm going to give you these things. And then those people get elected. Yeah. And then that just, they promise you all these things about how your community is going to get better, and they stay the same or get worse.
Right. And that's the total Democratic game right there. And I'm not giving Republicans a pass either, because honestly, both parties have, you know, really gotten too big and out of hand. But
that's why I didn't like put it to one or the other.
I know, right? It totally does. But especially the Democrat side, that's how they gain the base of their vote, is by, quote, freebies, which it just cracks me up, because free, nothing is free. Right. That money's getting stolen. No government in the history of mankind creates wealth. People who work create wealth. So if you're getting something for free, that's coming right out of the pocket of someone who worked for it. Yeah. Getting stolen from them.
Yeah. I was just working on my taxes too and thinking about, good heck, how much do we pay?
Oh, yeah. It's crazy.
Well, I think that kind of covers a lot of it.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day long. We could be here all night.
I mean, I wrote down about I don't know, 10 things, and I think we've crossed most of them.
Awesome.
You got anything else? Anywhere else you want to go?
I mean, I think we hit a lot of great points. I guess I would just summarize with how vital it is right now that we get involved in our local communities, that we look to God, that we're not afraid to talk about God, our God-given rights, and realize that if we don't take a stand, we are in trouble. I mean, we're already in trouble, but we have to set that fear aside and fear God more than man.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, we're voting for you.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Amanda won't let me vote for anyone else anyway.
Make her steal your ballot, put my name on there. It's perfect.
All right.
Hey, Michelle, what is your Instagram so our audience can follow you?
Oh, yeah. So it's, maybe I'll give you my campaign.
I think you have a couple, right?
Yeah, because my personal one, but I have that as private right now.
Campaign one's great.
But yeah, maybe I'll do the campaign one. So Tanner 4, number 4, St. George, St. George. So Tanner, number 4, St. George.
All right. People can get on there, contact you if they have questions.
Yep. And my Facebook one is public. Just Michelle Tanner is on there public, or Tanner for St. George on Facebook or Instagram.
And you've been talking. I mean, I've heard you were on the radio. I heard a little bit of that.
Yep. I've been on.
You did some panels.
Yeah, we had a debate last night, actually.
Was that last night?
Yep, with the 4 candidates. So that was good. And we have, I think, one more coming up, but it's at Sun River, so I don't think they're opening that to the public. So we're kind of we're winding down.
Yeah.
I mean, ballots have gone out. So, but yeah, anyone can contact me, ask me questions anytime. shelltanner@gmail.com if anyone wants to email me, SHELLTANNER@gmail.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. I appreciate you coming.
Hey,
this
thanks
was
for
fun.
having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I usually don't get like super vocal with people because we just talk about like people's lives. So that was fun for me.
Yeah, and I'll talk about, I'll talk about it all day long. So that's great.
All right. Well, guys, if you're still with us and you enjoyed it, go follow Michelle and we'll obviously vote for her. And let's get her in the city council. She can stand up for us. And some of you guys that want to be silent and want to be silent majority, let her do that for us.
Right. And I know, I'll just interject real quick. I know we didn't talk about a lot of the other local issues, which you can follow my page. I've talked about water on there. I've talked about what I feel of, vacation rentals, the short-term rentals, of course, infrastructure growth. All of those things are super important. And I've talked about those things a lot in other venues. So I know we hit mostly on Liberty, which I feel like is number one issue, but just so the listeners know, I do know that there's a lot of other important local issues here as well.
And they can get on that and do their own research on you and see what you've spoken.
Yep. I've got videos I've done with the water department here on my Facebook page. So definitely reach out, follow me on there. Awesome.
Well, hey guys, make sure you share the podcast, get it out to everybody. We're still coming at you every week. So we've been doing pretty good at doing that. If you're on Apple, rate us, write a little review for us. Let us know how we're doing. You can contact me. My personal stuff's just Derick Legg. And I mean, really, if you want to reach out to one of my businesses, you've got Weapon X Holsters, you've got Southern Utah Safe and Vault. My mom and I are forming a new business right now doing like liquidation sales. So I don't know if she's ready for me to drop the name, but I think we're going to call it Overstock Dixie.
Yeah, Dixie. Love that name in there.
That's why I did it. I was like, let's throw Dixie in because my brother has some ties to Red Rock, the name Red Rock. And so she was like, let's do Red Rock. And I'm like, no, if we're doing that, we're doing Dixie.
Dixie. I love it.
So, we're all over the place, but go ahead and rate us, comment. You can contact me. You can contact Mallory, Blueform Media. If you're interested in doing a podcast or maybe even just coming in and doing like a little video for yourself or a business, she can do anything. I mean, you're seeing the full extent of it with what we do. So thanks for coming. We'll see you guys next week.